Every summer, millions of gallons roar through irrigation pivots just to keep fields of alfalfa alive, while across the fence, cattle gorge themselves on deep-rooted legume trees that thrive unwatered, feeding herds for decades. Why has the farming industry trapped producers on an alfalfa treadmill, dependent on bought seed, chemical fertilizer, and relentless diesel, when a forgotten tree delivers the same protein, fixes its own nitrogen, and refuses to die? Who profits from the myth that only alfalfa works, and why did they bury a bacterial breakthrough that makes leucaena the ultimate protein machine? Tonight, we follow the evidence behind the cartel's nightmare and the smart ranchers who broke free. Alfalfa has long ruled as the so-called queen of forages, but her thirst is insatiable. Every acre demands a staggering 1.5 million gallons of water each year, enough to fill 60 backyard swimming pools. On the high plains, where rain is a rumor, and the Ogallala Aquifer is all that stands between green fields and desert, this addiction comes at a price. Center pivot irrigation systems spin day and night, pumping lifeblood from wells that drop lower with every season. The numbers are brutal. A single 116-acre ranch in the Texas Panhandle pulls over 76 acre-feet a month just to keep alfalfa alive through the summer. That is more than 215,000 gallons per acre per month, every month, all summer long. But the real pain is not just the water itself. Every extra inch pumped means higher diesel bills, more wear on the pivot, and a brutal sensitivity to the cost of groundwater. When pump prices spike or wells run dry, entire fields can go brown overnight. Agricultural economists warn that alfalfa's water footprint is not just a line item, it is a ticking time bomb. As aquifers sink, the margin for error vanishes. A drought year, a busted pump, or a new water regulation can wipe out a season's profit in a blink. For producers locked into this cycle, the risk is not just running out of water, it is running out of options. Alfalfa may be queen, but she rules a shrinking, thirsty kingdom. Across the fence, a new contender waits, one that drinks deep, but not often. Synthetic fertilizer is the next link in the alfalfa treadmill, one that tightens with every season. Alfalfa may fix some of its own nitrogen, but high-yield fields still demand a steady stream of outside inputs. On the high plains, standard practice calls for 80 to 120 pounds of synthetic nitrogen per acre every single year. Add to that 20 to 30 pounds of phosphate and another 10 to 20 pounds of potash, and the invoices start to stack up. At current rates, that is $85 to $110 per acre just for nitrogen, $30 to $45 per acre for phosphorus and potassium, and another $15 to $25 per acre for herbicides. Total it up, and the annual synthetic input bill for alfalfa runs $125 to $160 per acre before a single bale leaves the field. This is not a one-time expense. Every spring, the spreader rolls out again, chasing yield and patching nutrient leaks. Miss a year, and the stand thins. Push too hard, and the soil sours under a chemical load. The treadmill never stops. Fertilizer, herbicide, diesel, repeat. Extension cost charts show these inputs now rival or even exceed the value of the hay in dry years, especially when fertilizer prices spike. For many, the input spiral feels inescapable, a system designed to keep producers buying, applying, and hoping for a break-even. The alfalfa treadmill is not just about water. It is about being locked into a cycle where the crop cannot stand on its own roots, and the farmer cannot get off without taking a loss. Every alfalfa grower knows the clock starts ticking the moment a new stand goes in. By year 3, the lush green carpet begins to thin. Weeds creep in through bare patches, and what was once a wall-to-wall stand starts to break up. Root rot, nematodes, and relentless compaction chip away at yields, no matter how carefully you fertilize or irrigate. By year 5, the field is a patchwork of faded promise, alfalfa plants barely holding their ground against the onslaught of bindweed and pigweed. That's when the real bill comes due. The only path forward is to rip it all out and start again. Land has to rest, sometimes for a year or more, before it can be replanted. During that downtime, there is no hay to cut, no revenue to count. Then comes the capital outlay, seed, land prep, and labor all over again. Extension budgets peg the cost of reseeding at $150 to $200 per acre, not counting the lost production during fallow. For a 100-acre operation, that is $15,000 to $20,000 every few years, money spent just to stay in the same place. As one producer puts it, you think you're ahead, then the stand falls apart, and you're right back at zero. The cycle is relentless. Every few years, another round of checks written, another season lost to weeds and reestablishment. The treadmill never stops, and the meter keeps running. The machinery lineup for alfalfa harvest reads like a parade of steel and diesel. Swathers cut the crop, tedders fluff it, rakes gather it into windrows, and balers, square or round, take your pick, pack it tight for storage or sale. Each step runs on fuel, labor, and time, all synchronized to the weather's unpredictable clock. Miss the window and a summer thunderstorm can turn a field of prime hay into a mat of ruined stems overnight. Every pass across the field burns through diesel, about 1.5 gallons per acre for each cutting, multiplied by the number of harvests in a season. On 100 acres, that is hundreds of gallons before the hay even leaves the farm. Add the constant maintenance, blades to sharpen, belts to replace, hydraulic leaks to chase. Then there is depreciation, the slow bleed of value as equipment ages, loses efficiency, and eventually demands replacement. Extension budgets peg machinery costs at $80 to $120 per acre every year just to keep the harvest moving. It is a system built on moving parts and rigid schedules. The crop does not wait, and neither do the bills. For producers, the real harvest is not just hay, it is a pile of invoices for fuel, repairs, and equipment loans. The mechanical trap is set. Miss a step, and the whole operation grinds to a halt. On the alfalfa treadmill, the machines never sleep, and the meter never stops running. In a corner of a sun-blasted research plot, an agronomist kneels among rows of young trees that look nothing like the thirsty alfalfa fields just beyond the fence. This is Leucaena leucocephala, often called the alfalfa of the tropics. A tree with roots as deep as its reputation is mysterious. Native to Central America, leucaena first spread along the ancient trade routes, thriving in blistering heat, battered soils, and places where ordinary crops wither. Its secret is adaptability. Where alfalfa shrinks from drought and compaction, leucaena pushes down a taproot that can chase water through rock and clay, holding on through months of dry season. The agronomist points out the difference. Leucaena does not just survive where others fail, it flourishes. In the right climate, these trees shrug off temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, outcompete weeds, and keep producing leaf forage for decades. But there is a catch. Leucaena is no miracle for every zip code. Its true power shows up in USDA hardiness zones 9 through 11, where frost is a rare visitor and heat is relentless. North of Zone 8, a hard winter can kill it to the ground, and the dream of perennial protein ends with the first deep freeze. Within the species, breeders have sorted over 800 cultivars into 3 main groups: shrubby types for fences and fuel, giants reaching 60 feet for timber, and the prized Peru types, branched, leafy, and bred for maximum forage. Some hybrids even blend low-toxin, high-yield traits for tough soils or heavy grazing. In the hands of a knowledgeable rancher, leucaena is not just a tree, it is a living engine, tuned to the harshest corners of the cattle belt. The question is not whether it can grow, but whether the old story about what makes a real forage still holds up when the roots run this deep. A steel soil core slides from the ground, revealing the story beneath the dust. Where alfalfa roots tangle shallow and desperate, leucaena drives a single, unbroken shaft straight down 6 feet, 10 feet, sometimes more. This is the subterranean drill. The taproot plunges through clay and stone, tapping moisture that shallow crops never reach. In a drought year, when pivots stand idle and the surface bakes, leucaena's leaves stay green, It does not just endure dry spells, it escapes them, pulling water from the deep reserves that lie far below the reach of ordinary forage. Agronomists measure these roots with tape and spade, mapping a system that ignores the boundaries confining alfalfa. While fibrous rooted plants compete for the same thin slice of topsoil, leucaena mines a second water table, leaving the surface for companion grasses. In field trials, mature taproots consistently exceed 6 feet, with some documented beyond 12 feet, a living well that keeps the tree alive through 4 months of drought. This architecture is not just about survival. Deep roots mean less dependence on irrigation, fewer emergency diesel runs, and a stand that shrugs off compaction and shallow tillage. Where alfalfa surrenders to hardpan and root rot, leucaena tunnels deeper, breaking up layers that suffocate lesser crops. The taproot is more than a biological curiosity. It is the foundation of water independence, the first crack in the alfalfa treadmill, and buried along those roots, nodules begin their quiet work, fixing nitrogen, building fertility from the ground up. The machinery of resilience starts here, far below the reach of surface drought and short-term thinking. A soil scientist brushes the dirt from a cluster of nodules clinging to a leucaena root, holding up a living answer to the fertilizer treadmill. Each nodule is a tiny factory, packed with rhizobium bacteria that pull nitrogen straight from the air, turning it into plant-ready fuel. Where alfalfa fields demand annual truckloads of synthetic nitrogen just to keep yields afloat, leucaena fixes its own, about 100 pounds of pure nitrogen per acre, every year, rain or shine. That is not a theoretical figure. It has been measured, counted, and confirmed on working ranches from Texas to Queensland. This biological engine does not just feed the tree, it leaks surplus nitrogen into the surrounding soil, fertilizing the companion grasses that grow in the alleys between the rows. Bahia grass and Bermuda grass, usually starved for nutrients after the first flush of spring, surge back to life under the drip line of leucaena. In field trials, pastures under these trees produce up to 40% more grass without a single pass of the fertilizer spreader. The cost-saving mechanism is simple. No synthetic nitrogen, no diesel burned hauling and spreading, no risk of leaching precious dollars into the groundwater. The soil scientist runs the numbers. After establishment, the leucaena system replaces $85 to $110 worth of synthetic nitrogen per acre with a living, self-renewing supply. The result is not just a lower bill, it is a field that feeds itself, even through the dry season. For ranchers used to watching input prices rise and margins shrink, this is the first taste of independence. The biological factory runs quietly, year after year, making the old fertilizer invoice look as outdated as a rotary phone. In the heart of a Texas summer, when the wind scalds and the grass folds under the sun, most pastures slip into silence. Alfalfa fields, once green, stand brittle, dormant, and done until rains return or pivots spin up. But in the alleys between leucaena rows, the story is different. Here, green leaves still hang thick on the branches, casting a living shade over the parched earth. The trees do not just survive, they create a pocket of resilience, cooling the ground beneath their canopy by as much as 5 degrees Celsius. That is not just a number, it is the difference between baked clay and a patch of grass that can keep growing when everything else shuts down. Rancher Juan Perez walks the rows, boots crunching on dry soil outside the leucaena stand, but stepping into the shade, he finds green bahia grass still pushing up through the litter. He does not haul hay through the hottest months. His cattle graze straight from the trees, plucking leaves that stay lush when the rest of the range is brown. For him, the dry season gap, the weeks or months when alfalfa vanishes and hay prices spike, is not a crisis. It is a solved problem. The leucaena system stretches the grazing season, closing the forage gap that forces most ranchers onto expensive hay or risky feed contracts. It is not just about keeping cattle fed. The microclimate under the trees means less heat stress, better weight gain, and water troughs that do not run dry so fast. While neighbors scramble to buy hay or idle pivots, Perez's herd keeps moving, grazing green on a field that never really sleeps. The result is more than peace of mind. It is a bottom-line advantage that stacks up every year, one dry season after another. A lab technician slides a tray of dried leucaena leaves into the analyzer, punching in the sample code. The digital readout flashes 29.4% crude protein. The number stands shoulder to shoulder with the best alfalfa hay ever baled in the valley. For decades, the feed industry has pushed the myth that nothing matches alfalfa's protein punch. But here, under the cold fluorescent lights, the numbers tell a different story. Multiple assays, run across seasons and locations, come back with the same result. Leucaena routinely delivers 25 to 30% crude protein on a dry matter basis. That is not a fluke or a one-off. It is the average for mature, leafy growth, with younger shoots sometimes testing even higher. The mineral profile is just as strong. Calcium and phosphorus levels check every box for growing cattle, meeting and often exceeding National Research Council requirements. Fresh leucaena leaves sampled from Silvopasture plots in Texas and Queensland show digestibility rates that rival alfalfa when cattle harvest the foliage themselves. The lab's protein analyzer, calibrated for both hay and tree forage, finds no nutritional gap, only a marketing one. The data is clear. Leucaena is not a protein compromise. It is a direct match for premium alfalfa, with the added advantage of being a living, regrowing source that needs no baling, no barn, and no middleman. The old story of protein inferiority dissolves under the lens of hard science, leaving only the question of why so few ranchers have been told the truth. A weathered veterinarian flips through a dog-eared ledger, his finger pausing on a line from the 1950s. Hair loss, goiter, suspicion, leucaena. For decades, this tree carried a warning label in every extension bulletin from Hawaii to Texas. The culprit was mimosine, a non-protein amino acid that can make up more than 3% of fresh leucaena leaves. When cattle diets tip past 0.5% mimosine on a dry matter basis, clinical signs appear. First, a thinning coat, then swelling at the throat as the thyroid strains against a silent chemical blockade. In the worst cases, weight gain stalls and young stock can fade before anyone draws the connection. Ranchers remember the stories: herds gone patchy, calves born weak, the bitter aftertaste of a forage that promised plenty but delivered a hidden cost. The veterinarian recalls treating animals with bald flanks and rubbery enlarged thyroids. Those symptoms lingered in the collective memory long after the last leucaena was grubbed from the fence row. The numbers were clear enough to keep the tree on the blacklist. Extension agents set the threshold: keep mimosine below 0.5% of the diet's dry matter, or risk the consequences. For years, that warning was enough to keep leucaena out of serious forage systems, no matter how much protein it packed. The toxicity myth took root, and for a generation, the story ended there. Problem unsolved, potential locked away. In the early 1980s, a microbiologist in Hawaii peered through a microscope at a sample pulled from the rumen of a goat. What he found would rewrite the story of leucaena forever. Hidden among the swirl of microbes was a single, unremarkable bacterium, later named Synergistes jonesii, that held the key to the tree's so-called curse. This organism carried an enzyme called mimosinase. With a singular talent, it could break down mimosine, the very toxin that had haunted leucaena's reputation for generations. Where cattle once lost hair and weight, animals hosting this microbe thrived, even on diets packed with leucaena leaves. Discovery. The science moved quickly. Trials showed that a simple oral drench, just a few milliliters of Synergistes jonesii culture, could seed a herd's rumen with this microscopic ally. Within weeks, the bacteria multiplied and spread, passing from animal to animal through shared water and feed. The result was stunning. Cattle could now graze leucaena at rates up to 60% of their diet's dry matter, with no sign of toxicity. Feed intake jumped, weight gain soared, and the old specter of mimosine vanished from blood tests and vet ledgers alike. The discovery transformed leucaena from a risky gamble into a manageable, high-performance feed. No more hair loss, no more thyroid problems, just a single biological hack that turned a perennial problem into a solved equation. The tree's full potential, locked away for decades by a single molecule, was now open to any rancher willing to harness the power of a microbe. A veterinarian in mud-caked boots stands at the chute, drawing up a measured dose of culture, 10 to the 9th colony-forming units, the gold standard for herd inoculation. This is not a chemical or a drug, but a living solution, Synergistes jonesii, the microbe that unlocks leucaena's full power. The protocol is simple. Each animal receives an oral drench, delivered by drench gun, just 7 days before their first taste of tree forage. For a 600-pound steer, that is about 3 milliliters, barely a sip, but enough to seed the rumen with a new digestive ally. Within a month, the bacteria spread through the herd, passed in shared water troughs and on the slick sides of salt blocks. By day 30, over 90% of the cattle test positive for colonization. The transformation is visible in the numbers. Average daily gain leaps by 24%, feed intake climbs, and the old symptoms of hair loss, swelling, and weight stall become rare memories. No more patchy coats or rubbery throats, just healthy cattle, thriving on a diet that would have been off-limits a generation ago. For ranchers ready to make the switch, suppliers now offer certified cultures and a simple checklist. Verify the dose, confirm the source, and schedule the drench before leucaena enters the ration. The veterinarian signs off, confident that with one low-tech step, the herd is ready for a perennial future, no longer haunted by the old toxicity myth, and instead powered by a partnership as old as ruminants and grass. A consultant stands in the middle of a field, clipboard in hand, boots planted between two slender lines of saplings. This is the backbone of intensive leucaena Silvopasture, the twin-row layout. Each pair of rows sits 15 to 30 feet apart, measured with the precision of a surveyor's tape, not guesswork. The alleys are broad enough for a tractor and wide enough for sunlight to spill onto the companion grasses. They stretch between these green corridors. The geometry is simple but ruthless in its logic. Too tight, and the trees choke each other out. Too wide, and you leave protein and shade on the table. The consultant runs the numbers. At a standard spacing, 1 acre takes about $280 in seedlings. That's a single upfront cost, not a recurring bill. The math is as clear as the layout. Every row is a living fence, every alley a runway for grass and grazing. This isn't a patchwork experiment. It's a blueprint you can walk, count, and budget. The result is a system that fits the land, not the other way around. No wasted space, no wasted money, and no mystery about what it will take to get started. A rancher swings open the gate and the herd moves in. No diesel engines, no baler dust, no race against the weather. Here, the harvest walks on 4 legs. Leucaena's leaves hang within reach, packed with protein, waiting to be stripped straight from the branch. This is direct harvest, and it rewrites the math of forage production. The cattle do the work that used to demand a convoy of machines. There is no need for swathers, rakes, or balers, no fuel tanks to fill, no blades to sharpen. The diesel bill for harvest drops to near zero. Extension budgets show that in a typical alfalfa system, just cutting and baling burns through 3 gallons of diesel per acre per year, not counting the fuel for irrigation or hauling. On a leucaena pasture, that number rounds down to a rounding error. Every pound of manure lands where it is needed, cycling nutrients back into the soil instead of piling up in a feedlot. The savings are not just on paper, they are in the pocket of every rancher who trades steel and diesel for sunlight and hooves. With the machines parked and the fuel gauge barely moving, the only real limit now is how many mouths the land can feed. Rancher logbooks tell the story in numbers that don't lie. On fields once limited to half a cow per acre, sometimes less, leucaena Silvopasture flips the script. Stocking rates climb to 1, sometimes even 1.5 head per acre, year after year. That is not a one-off season. It is a 2 to 3 times jump in carrying capacity, confirmed on working ranches from the Texas Panhandle to the Queensland coast. The reason is simple. When grass alone dries up, the trees keep feeding. After each grazing pass, leucaena regrows its leaves in just 30 to 40 days, ready for another round. This relentless cadence means more mouths fed, more weight gained, and more calves weaned off the same ground. Ranchers running the numbers find themselves with twice the herd or twice the throughput without breaking the land or the bank. The throughput advantage is not a sales pitch. It is written in shipping receipts and sale barn checks. Where the alfalfa treadmill stumbles and stalls, leucaena keeps the gate open, multiplying returns for those willing to step off the old path. A ranch manager stands at the whiteboard, marker in hand, plotting out the next rotation. This is not the frantic scramble of the alfalfa cycle, where every harvest chips away at stand life and every missed rain means another gamble lost. Here, the schedule has a different rhythm, a 35-day interval, as steady as a clock. After cattle strip the leaves, the trees leap back to life, sending out new shoots in a matter of weeks. By the time the herd circles back, the canopy is thick again, ready for another round. Logbooks track this relentless rebound. Graze, regrow, repeat. The operation runs more like a perpetual forage conveyor than a traditional pasture. There is no downtime for replanting, no waiting on rain to coax up a fragile seedling. Instead, the manager adjusts the rotation plan, confident that the trees will deliver season after season. In this system, the supply is not just continuous, it is regenerative, erasing the old economics of input and exhaustion. Where alfalfa fields stall and fade, leucaena stands build momentum, forging a new calendar that rewards patience and precision, not panic. An agricultural economist runs the numbers, sliding a finger across a chart that stretches not 5 years, but 40. Leucaena isn't a crop. It's a one-time investment that wipes out the annual bills that keep alfalfa growers chained to the input treadmill. After the first 5 years, the annualized maintenance cost for a mature leucaena stand drops to just $5 to $10 per acre. No replanting, no seed orders, no lost seasons waiting for the ground to recover. The trees keep producing year after year, while the cost of establishment dissolves into rounding error. It's the difference between renting your forage and owning it outright. As each decade passes, the accountant's ledger shows fewer expenses and more freedom. No check written for synthetic nitrogen, no invoice for pivot repairs, no panic when diesel spikes. For ranchers used to watching profit margins evaporate under a mountain of recurring costs, this is what liberation looks like. A forage system that erases inputs and locks in decades of production from a single planting. Leucaena's power comes with a catch that makes it invisible in glossy seed catalogs and glossy extension flyers. Unlike patented alfalfa varieties, leucaena's genetics are open-pollinated and unpatentable. Anyone can plant it, propagate it, and share cuttings without paying royalties. There is no corporate leash, no annual seed contract, no chemical package bundled in. For companies built on selling new seed and fertilizer every season, a tree that feeds itself for 40 years is a business model nightmare, not a profit center. In USDA Zone 8 and colder, hard winters can kill it back to the roots, limiting its spread and keeping it off the list of federally restricted species. Yet in frost-free zones, state agencies sometimes flag it as potentially invasive, requiring ranchers to manage buffer strips and monitor seed set. The economics are simple. An asset that cannot be patented, resold, or locked behind a trademark will never get the marketing push of crops tied to annual input sales. That is why, despite decades of proven performance, leucaena remains a secret hiding in plain sight, ignored not for lack of value, but for lack of profit potential to the companies that dominate the input treadmill. The spreadsheet doesn't lie. On one side, alfalfa's ledger fills with line after line: diesel for pivot pumps, synthetic nitrogen, phosphate, potash, herbicides, and the relentless march of equipment depreciation. Each year, the meter spins: $90 to $150 for water, $125 to $160 for fertilizer and chemicals, and $80 to $120 just to keep the machinery rolling. Add in the seed and replanting every few years, and the annual cost soars past $480 an acre before a single bale is sold. The entire operation teeters on a razor's edge. Change the water cost by a few dollars per acre-foot, and profits evaporate. Extension budgets peg the break even at $110 per acre-foot of water. Above that, most alfalfa fields bleed red ink. Meanwhile, leucaena's side of the ledger is nearly blank. No diesel for harvest, no synthetic nitrogen, no replanting cycle, and a maintenance bill that shrinks to $10 an acre after establishment. The numbers are decisive. The real cost of cheap alfalfa isn't in the hay barn, it's in the hidden losses, the constant risk, and the treadmill that never stops. Profit is not just a number in a spreadsheet, it is the difference between staying in the fight and folding when the next drought or diesel spike hits. On a 10-acre pilot, the real test comes down to tracking what matters. Water pumped, gallons of diesel burned, pounds of synthetic fertilizer skipped, and the weight gain logged in the scale book. Every rancher who has made the leap starts with a baseline. They measure soil moisture, record input bills, and weigh every load that leaves the gate. Then, after a single season, the split is clear. Where the alfalfa side racks up invoices and maintenance logs, the leucaena rows keep feeding cattle with little more than sunlight and rain. The rancher's endorsement is not a sales pitch. It is a copy of last year's ledger with the bottom line circled. An economist reviewing the data calls it the clearest case for resilience, a system that trades risk for reliability and debt for decades of production. The pilot plot becomes a blueprint, proof that the real measure of success is not how many bales you stack, but how many years your land and herd can weather the next storm. For those ready to step off the treadmill, the roadmap is simple. Start small, measure everything, and let the numbers speak for themselves. Today, the queen of forages stands on shaky ground. As water vanishes and diesel bills climb, the alfalfa treadmill looks less like progress and more like a trap. Every leucaena row planted is a vote for independence, nutrient cycles restored, profit reclaimed, resilience rebuilt. The real revolution isn't in chasing yield, but in breaking free. The question is no longer what feeds your herd, but what keeps you free. Drop your perspective below.